Welcome everybody to today's uncomfortable conversation. I'm here with Daniel Gleghorn. He is the chair of the LGBTQ plus and allies network here at NHS Digital. Dan, it's brilliant to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I know that you have written a little blog about your early experiences growing up as a gay man in a small Catholic village in Spain, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, so I'd love to hear a bit more about what that was like.
So I moved to Spain when I was 6 years old. I moved there from Australia, which is where I was born, and moved there because I'm half Spanish on my mother's side, and parents decided that they wanted myself and my sister to learn Spanish. And when we got there, as I said, I was 6 years old, and it was a small village in the outskirts of Spain, of Madrid in Spain, and it was very, very Catholic, as is most of Spain. I went to a Catholic school and was taught by nuns in the 8 years that I was there. I did my Holy Communion in Spain when I think I would have been 11 years old, maybe 12. And obviously all of the religious education that I had was around Catholicism, the Roman Catholic faith. I knew that I was gay when I was 10 years old, which did mean that obviously I knew before I had my Holy Communion, and it was quite hard, I guess, with some of the things that I was learning at school and the text that we were reading. It was quite hard to come to terms with that.
So 10, was that the age that you knew you were gay, or was that the age where you felt that you knew the language to describe what you were?
So 10 is when I was able to apply the label of gay to myself. I think looking back, and it is quite interesting looking at your childhood and identifying little bits that may have been a sort of an advanced warning, so to speak. But I knew when I was 6 years old, I would often find myself just looking more at like boys than girls and that sort of thing. So I guess I'd probably say that I think it's fair to say that no one has a particular day that they wake up and say, "Oh, I'm gay as of today." It doesn't really work like that. So I think I started to notice these things when I was about 6, but then at the age of 10 is when I was formally able to apply the label to myself. And unfortunately, that came with a lot of difficult moments. As I said, it was a Catholic teachings rather than upbringing, because my family wasn't particularly practicing. My direct family is in my parents. And at school, it was very much a case of, we had, as I said, the Catholic religious education. We had a church in our school. We had mass that we had to go to every Wednesday. Following my Holy Communion, we even had every Wednesday we had to go and confess our sins every single Wednesday.
You were obliged to. It wasn't.
Yes, it was mandatory. It was mandatory.
Oh wow. Okay.
So we had to go there, and I remember having a real conflict, because I knew at that point that I was gay, and I remember in our religious education lessons, it was heavily centered around reading the Bible and reading the verses, and I believe it's Leviticus 18:22 specifically that it's often discusses this area. And I remember reading that verse and being told that a man laying with another man was a huge sin, and you'd go to hell and burn in the flames of hell for all eternity. Now, when I was 11, 12 years old, then having to go to confession every Wednesday, when I knew that I felt something that was wrong, according to what I'd been told.
Mm.
Having to go to confession, and it's almost like it felt like someone was trying to force me to say it in an environment that wasn't safe. And that's how I felt. I don't think anyone was saying, well, you need to go there and say whether you're gay or not, but it's just how it felt to me.
Yeah.
As an individual. And I often found myself almost feeling like I should say it, but being too scared of what they would say. And then it often resulted in me making up things that I'd done, making up sins, saying that or that I'd been bad with my sister or something, like just making something up when I knew that there was this thing that if I said it, something bad could happen.
Wow. So the term had a real loaded history for you, from the moment that you learned of it and learned to apply it to yourself.
Massively, yeah. I didn't have in this small, in my school, it was quite a big school, to be honest. So there was 3 classes per year, about 30 students per class, and it went from preschool to sixth form. So it was a really big school.
It's expensive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't know of anyone in my year who was gay, and if they were, I can't say for certain whether they were or weren't, but if they were, I would have assumed that they would have been in the same position as me. There was one boy a couple of years older than me who did come out and was unfortunately bullied out of school, and he ended up leaving after some physical and verbal bullying.
Wow.
So that was my point of reference, so to speak.
Okay, so you moved to the UK in your teens. Did things change?
So I moved to the UK when I was 14. I think it took me. I hadn't come to terms with it yet. I still felt at 14 that it was wrong.
Mm.
And I had a couple of years in the UK before I was able to come out at the age of 16. Now, I think the biggest thing that helped me with that was the fact that there were other visible gay people that come out, whether that was gay men or lesbian women that had come out in that school environment, and nothing bad happened to them. So
Right.
that's what sort of drove me to want to come out. It's also important, I think, to highlight that when I came to the UK, I more or less renounced my religion, I guess. It's a bit of a strange one, because obviously in Spain I was forced to go to mass every Wednesday and go to confession, and it felt more like an obligation. And even when I was going to confession, I remember every single time walking up there being filled with a sense of dread and fear every single Wednesday morning when I was going to confession. When I came to England, all of that disappeared, because it was no longer a requirement to go there at 9 o'clock in the morning. However, it wasn't as easy as I said to you before. It wasn't like flicking a switch and that everything was fine. I came out, but I didn't come out. I came out to my mother and my sister, and mainly to all of my friends, and they were really, really supportive. But I very much drew a line between my England life and my Spanish life. It was a line in the sand, and it was very much like a new beginning, because I could cut all ties of what I felt, but that did mean that I ended up boxing up a lot of those emotions and not really dealing with them. Now, when I reflect back, and if you were to say, how have things changed for you? Was it an imminent thing that you came out and you were happy and things like that? Yes, I was happier, but there was a lot of things that I've realized now with time that lingered on from that time in Spain. I tried to draw that line in the sand, but it didn't work. I realized as I was starting to date other men, for example, that I would be very much against dating anyone who didn't fit the stereotypical male persona. So anyone who was even remotely, well, it was really the sort of what you would expect to be the sort of traditional views of what a man should be. That in my head was the only person that I could date. And I realize now that the reason for that is that I was genuinely still afraid of being outed. So I wanted to date someone that could pass, and that is a horrible term to use, but it gets used quite often. I could only see myself dating someone like that because I was afraid that someone might say something. And that was sort of well, as I said, it's the internalized homophobia. It's that shame that I didn't want. I wanted to pass. So I'd half come to terms with the fact that I was gay, but at the same time, I felt like I needed to pass and not really be myself, and also that reflected on other people.
So did you keep in touch with anyone from your village, or would you go back and visit them if you had the chance?
So I do go back to the village to occasionally, because I do still have some family there. As for people that I keep in touch with, there's actually only one person from my childhood friends that I keep in touch with, and it's quite interesting because it so happens that this one guy that I keep in touch with, when I was in year 8, I think would have been the equivalent in the UK. He went over to America for a term, and he studied there for 6 months, and then came back, and then did his university in Spain, but then has lived in Belgium and in loads of other countries. So he was actually the only one from my group that did that, and he had a very different worldview to most of the people in that village, and he's, funnily enough, the only one that I've kept in touch with.
Interesting. So there's obviously something there. Those who've remained, I guess, they are living in an environment that perhaps we can't imagine in the UK or in parts of the UK, where Catholicism is so deeply interwoven into their culture. Do you think things are improving in the church?
Now, that's quite a difficult question. I think we, as a society, are improving. As individuals within a society, we are becoming more tolerant and more inclusive. There's still a lot of work to be done, but because this society is progressing, there will be individuals of all the different faiths and any other group that is moving along with that improvement, as far as I'm concerned, of society. Now, the church itself, I think, is a slightly different question, and this is my personal view.
Of course,
that we need to, in a way that well, I can only speak realistically from the Catholic Church's perspective, because that's what I knew. Need to appreciate the fact that it is still slightly a political establishment, and they have a group of people that they need to appease. And I think it's quite clear that there's that political turmoil, in the sense that obviously the Pope relatively recently came out and in support of same-sex marriage, and then we very recently had a U-turn entirely from that respect. So I think that the Catholic Church has that conflict, where I'm assuming some of them want to progress along with the more moderate and inclusive views of society, but there will be a group that is against that. So unfortunately, given that U-turn, I can't say that things have improved in the church. However, there will be individuals of faith that have improved. So you have to separate the two.
Of course, and we do say, this is a conversation between you and me. These are just your opinions. If you've talked to one gay man, you've talked to exactly one gay man. You're not a representative of a religion or a representative of a community. You're just yourself. So thank you for sharing those insights. And do you think there are some people in the gay community who would be willing to marry in a Catholic church if it were possible?
Yes, I think is the answer to that question. Me personally, I couldn't, because from my personal experience, it's so ingrained, and I was brought up being told that the Catholic Church would never condemn, would never accept same-sex marriage. So for me, it feels a bit odd, the idea of wanting to get married in a church, because as far as I'm concerned, they do not accept who I am. That's my opinion. However, there are a lot of people who think differently, and I do know of people, especially if you look at countries like Spain or Italy, where religion is so intertwined with their day-to-day living, their culture, everything, when it comes to, maybe even telling people that, for example, in Spain, you don't tend to have Santa Claus bringing you presents, you have the three wise men. There's that religious undertone to everything, and faith is such a big part of their culture. So there will be plenty of LGBT people who want to get married in a church for different reasons. However, I'm just not one of them.
Yeah, and that's quite understandable, and your right to choose. Okay. So moving on then from your upbringing and coming out in your teen years, what's work been like for you as a gay man?
So I think it's for anyone who knows me in NHS Digital knows that I'm very open about my sexuality. I actually went through a stage, and I'm probably still doing it now, of purposefully outing myself within the first week of joining a new team. And some people might see this as a bad thing, and it is bad in a way. But for me, it's almost like I want to challenge people. So I want to come out as soon as I join the team. And if you have something bad to say it then. And I will do whatever I have to do to resolve that situation. But I do purposefully out myself. And equally, if there was someone else in the team who didn't feel comfortable, then at least I'm the guinea pig in a way, in the same way that some of my friends were the first ones to come out in school. You need that visible person to make the first to take the first step in order to assess whether you're in a safe environment or not. Now, I'm quite lucky that every team that I've worked in has been really, really accepting, and the individuals that I've worked with have been great, really. So I've not had any negative experiences, but that's not to say that there's not other people that have.
Of course. Okay. So we've heard about your experiences growing up. We've heard about the shame and the fear that little boy of 10 felt. Just to wrap up, Dan, would you have any advice that you would give that 10-year-old boy? What would you say to him?
I think it's more a case that things will get better. Is the only thing that I could say to my younger self. And I think I was not trapped, but I couldn't see past the world that was in my small village. That small village was my whole world at the time. Despite the fact that I'd moved about and gone on holidays and stuff like that, I couldn't see living anywhere else in that young mind. That was it. It was my village, my prison in a metaphorical way that I couldn't see a way out of. So I'd probably let my younger self know that there is a world out there that is different to the one that you currently feel trapped in.
I hope you now know that you have friends who love and accept you, and that you're in a happier place now. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, Dan. It's been an emotional and a brave conversation, I think it's fair to say. Now, this is one of many uncomfortable conversations we have here in NHS Digital. Do check out our previous conversations, and we've got more coming up in the next few months. Thank you everyone for attending.